the current focus in the clinic, so where we are testing this already in patients, in humans, are in lung cancer and a very specific form of lung cancer that's called non-small cell lung cancer. That's where we are in a phase 2 clinical trial, and we expect new activity data actually within a month. So this is imminent, and we expect top-line overall survival data in the second quarter of next year.
Welcome to Business Ninjas, brought to you by WriteForMe, where you'll hear from business leaders who are out there growing their business and slaying it every day. Learn from the masters. Let's get started.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Business Ninjas. I'm here today with Paul Peter Tak, President and CEO of Candel Therapeutics. Paul Peter, how are you today?
I'm very well. It's great to be here, Andrew.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you spending some time with us here on Business Ninjas. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and about Candel Therapeutics.
Yeah, throughout my career, I've tried to improve the life of patients. I'm a physician, and I treated patients for many, many years. But also I've done a lot of research in academia, trying to develop the therapies of tomorrow. At some point, I decided to join the pharmaceutical industry because I thought, well, imagine that you can develop a medicine that will touch the life of many patients, and you could have actually much bigger impact. So I joined at the time GSK, GlaxoSmithKline, a big pharmaceutical company where I became the global head of development and the chief immunology officer. And I brought many molecules into the clinic, into clinical trials, and also to approval. And then at some point I thought, well, I want to continue to develop new therapies for patients with a high unmet need, but I want to do it in a more entrepreneurial setting. And that's when I became a CEO for biotech companies in the Boston area. And probably important to note that Boston is like the old Rome, where everything comes together. It's the capital of biotech of the world at this time.
Well, people in this country tend to only thank people for their service in the military and police, but I thank you for your service. I can't imagine a more important calling, and I'm glad you're in the position you're in. What's the origin story of Candel Therapeutics?
Yeah, the new Candel Therapeutics, as I call it, started in 2020. So 3 years ago, I've been with the company now for 3 years. And basically, we integrated multiple programs. First, a program from a company called Advantagene doing business as Candel, that's where the name Candel came from, and we formalized the change of the name. That's where one of the investigational medicines came from, which we now call CAN2409. And we're testing it in multiple clinical trials in solid tumors. The second is a program that we in-licensed from the Brigham and Women's Hospital. And that's an investigational medicine that's in an early stage of development in patients that we now call CAN3110. And then third, we in-licensed knowledge, intellectual property, from a biotech company called Perivogen. And that plays now an important role in our discovery platform, where we can make new medicines again and again. So that's early discovery. So that together became the new Candel Therapeutics.
And is there a particular focus in terms of what cancers you're going after?
Yes, absolutely. So when we make decisions about which indications we want to pursue, we look at this through multiple lenses. So the first is, what's the medical unmet need? Does it make sense actually from a medical perspective? Is there a significant unmet need? Is there a reason to believe based on the science? Not only based on data in preclinical models, in other words, let's say in mouse models or in rat models, but is there actually reason to believe based on human biology? Because that increases the probability that you will have a medicine at the other end of this. Is there a development path forward? Do we believe that it's possible to develop this from a regulatory perspective and from a payer perspective? Is there a big commercial opportunity? So if we can tick all these boxes, then we select an indication. So we focus on areas of huge unmet need.
And just to get a little more specific, what are those current foci?
Yeah, so the current focus in the clinic, so where we are testing this already in patients, in humans, are in lung cancer and a very specific form of lung cancer that's called non-small cell lung cancer. Mm-hmm. That's where we are in a phase 2 clinical trial, and we expect new activity data actually within a month. So this is imminent, and we expect top-line overall survival data in the second quarter of next year. And overall survival is what really matters to patients, right? Patients want to live longer with the right quality of life. We are not necessarily interested in treating MRI scans or CT scans, images, or get a dramatic change on these scans, but then the patient get a recurrence shortly after that and doesn't live longer. So we focus on overall survival. We'll have data in this indication, non-small cell lung cancer, in Q2, second quarter of next year. We have a program with the same investigational medicine, which is CAN-2409, in pancreatic cancer, specific subset of pancreatic cancer, which we call borderline resectable. Actually, it's not clear when the patient is diagnosed whether he or she will be able to undergo surgical resection. And these patients get standard of care, which involves chemotherapy, radiotherapy, if possible, surgery. But the outcomes are not great. As many people will know, it's a huge unmet need. And therefore, we have an ongoing randomized clinical trial where we give patients optimal standard of care plus 2 to 3 administrations of CAN-2409 or optimal standard of care alone. And we have followed a small cohort of these patients for almost 4 years now. And we expect to be able to look at, again, the same endpoint, overall survival in these patients in the last quarter of this year, at the end of this year. So this is not powered in a traditional way for statistical significance, but it is designed for what I call the bloody obvious test, as we call it in England, right? If you don't see a separation of the lines when you look at the overall survival between the active treatment group, CAN-2409, or the control group, then you don't have a transformative medicine. So we are hopeful that we will see very encouraging data. So that's the second indication for CAN-2409. And the third is early localized non-metastatic prostate cancer. Again, an area of huge unmet need. In fact, prostate cancer is the second most common cause of cancer in men in the US and in many other parts of the world. Number one is actually, if you group all the skin cancers together. So number two is prostate cancer. And in spite of the fact that many new therapies have been developed, all for late stage disease, actually prostate cancer is still the second most common cause of death, of mortality due to cancer in men. So this problem has not been solved at all. And in fact, no new medicine has been approved in early disease, what we are focused on, in the last 15, 20 years. We have 2 large randomized clinical trials, so patients get optimal standard of care, plus or minus CAN-2409, administered 2 to 3 times into the tumor, a simple procedure that takes about 15 minutes in an outpatient clinic, and that's it in a patient's life. And we will have the readout of this trial. We will look at the top-line data in the last quarter of next year. So this is a super exciting time for Candel Therapeutics. We are very energized because we have proof of mechanism in humans in each of these indications. And now we will learn, can we really change the life of the patients, right? And really improve it. And then for the other program, CAN-3110, that's being tested in a phase 1 clinical trial in recurrent high-grade glioma. So most of these patients will have glioblastoma, which is a form of brain cancer, which is very, very difficult to treat. These patients have a very poor prognosis. So when a patient with high-grade glioma is diagnosed, the expected median overall survival is only 15 months. However, we are focused on patients who have already undergone neurosurgical resection, surgery, and chemotherapy, and radiotherapy. And then in these patients, the tumor came back. So you can imagine that these patients have a much more unfavorable prognosis, often only a few weeks or a few months. And here we developed a true oncolytic virus, an herpes simplex virus, herpes may have a bad reputation, but these are engineered viruses that we use actually to attack specifically the tumor cells and inducing an immune response against the tumor cells while sparing the healthy tissue. And we have shown that we are able to do that. We had a recent presentation at ASGCT, big gene therapy meeting, and in Los Angeles, that we could show the results based on the first 50 patients, 50, with recurrent high-grade glioma. So this is not a small clinical trial anymore. And we could demonstrate almost doubling of the expected median overall survival after just a single injection without dose-limiting toxicity. So this is actually well tolerated. And we have a lot of data that we have not shared yet in the public domain, deep biomarker data. So we have a deep understanding of how this works, which patients may be more likely to respond. And we expect that this will be published in a very high impact journal, scientific journal, very soon. Here we could also expand into other diseases because this is all driven by a specific molecule that is called nestin. Nestin is absent from, for example, the healthy adult brain, but it's very strongly expressed in the tumor cells, in high-grade glioma tumor cells. We found that actually it's also highly expressed in skin cancers like melanoma, in gastrointestinal tumors, in a specific form of breast cancer, where there's still a big unmet need, in sarcoma, etc., what have you. So at the right time, when we have secured additional funding, I try to be super careful how we get to our inflection points. We're running a business that needs to survive. But at the right time, we can expand into these other indications as well. So we're very, very excited by these programs. So these are the indications: non-small cell lung cancer, pancreatic cancer, prostate cancer, high-grade glioma.
It's a fascinating time for Candel Therapeutics. I want to back up to something you mentioned, and I'm curious why you think there haven't been any advancements in 15, 20 years in the prostate cancer therapeutic space. We all think of there being just sort of a constant, expansion of knowledge and improvement in care. That seems like a long period of time in the modern era to not have any advancement.
Yeah, that's a great question. And the explanation is quite simple. It takes a long time to get to the answer. You need really long-term clinical trials to follow these patients, because what we have two ongoing trials. One is a phase 3 trial, which could be a registrational clinical trial. We're doing it under so-called special protocol assessment agreed with the FDA, with the regulators. It will read out at the end of next year. In this phase 3 trial, we focus on patients with a relatively aggressive form of prostate cancer. That's called intermediate to high-risk prostate cancer. They will get optimal standard of care, in this case, radiotherapy, plus or minus hormonal therapy. But we know that many of these patients are not cured over time. Many patients are cured, but not enough, right? I mentioned this is still the second most common cause of mortality due to cancer. What we try to achieve is to really increase the number of patients that will be cured. By adding CAN-2409 to the regimen, we give in total 3 injections into the prostate, that's it. And that takes years of follow-up to get to the answer, where we look at so-called disease-free survival. So maybe if I had led this program from the beginning, probably I would also have chosen to go for late-stage disease, because you get to quicker answers. You need big investments to get to these answers. The good news is, this study, which has enrolled 711 evaluable patients, is a big trial, is fully enrolled. Most of the follow-up is behind us. Most of this has been paid for in the past. So we are going to harvest what others have sown. But this explains why other people will all focus on late-stage disease. Also in the industry, many people imitate each other. I have to say, sometimes it feels a little bit like an echo chamber. So I think we have some very original programs, really focused on what is the right thing to do based on the unmet need.
I imagine one of the hardest things to do, you're a man of science, but this is a business at the end of the day, and it has to be liquid, it has to be profitable. Tell me how you have managed to grow a business like Candel Therapeutics in this modern era. Yeah, it's true. And ideally, these things would go hand in hand. And it's my conviction that if you develop transformative therapies and discontinue everything that's just a little bit incremental advantage,
that ultimately these medicines will be sold in the marketplace. They will be potentially blockbusters, and it will create value for everyone involved, for the employees, for shareholders, but most importantly, of course, for patients and for society. So these things should always go hand in hand, and that's exactly why I apply the filters that I described for rigorous decision-making and rigorous prioritization. So how did we build the company? I mentioned how we integrated different parts. We had rigorous prioritization. In fact, we were ready to start a big phase 3 clinical trial program where we had the signal, but I thought it was not going to be transformative. It was also in high-grade glioma. And also I thought it would not be as transformative as CAN-3110 might be in this indication. So we made difficult decisions. We discontinued that program, prioritized other programs. I brought in 100% new executive team, leaders in the field with decades of experience in immunology, in oncology, in drug discovery and development, in getting medicines over the finish line so that they can be approved and actually can become accessible to patients. We created a very strong research advisory board, RAB, with people like the Nobel Prize laureate, Jim Allison, who is the father of the field of immunotherapy in cancer, and other key experts of very high standing in the field, which helps me to get to the best decisions, because you may always have blind spots yourself. So strong focus on peer review, access to the brightest minds in my company, but also in academia. We brought in very strong new leaders in the board of directors, including people like Joe Papa, who was the CEO of Bausch & Lomb, Gary Nabel, who was the CSO of Sanofi, more recently, Nicoletta Loggia, who was the head of manufacturing of cell and gene therapy for Novartis, and she's a chief technology officer of a biotech company herself. Renee Gaeta, who is a finance leader in the medtech world. So all these people see the same as I do. We have the potential to develop transformative medicines. These programs have been unknown, but now we are in a position to really develop the next generation viral immunotherapies.
That is quite a brain trust you've assembled at Candel. Now, again, it's hard to think of this as being a business with competitors, because again, we're trying to save human lives, and the idea that there's competition involved, but at the end of the day, it is a business. What makes you stand out? What differentiates you from the other companies in the immunotherapy space?
Yeah, so first I agree, actually. We don't think in this way. We think about our colleagues, and there may be competition in the business place, but actually we focus on areas of such huge unmet need that actually there's not a lot of competition. If you focus on early localized prostate cancer, I'm not aware of any company that's in phase 2 or phase 3 with a first-line treatment of newly diagnosed prostate cancer. Basically, there's no competition. This market is open to us. We did very extensive external market research and commercial analysis. So there's big opportunity. Pancreatic cancer, everybody knows what the survival rates are in current clinical practice. I'm not aware of anything in the pipeline that appears to be really transformative. We hope to see that with a relatively simple intervention, the administration of CAN-2409 to the pancreatic tumors, that we can really significantly improve survival. So again, it's not an area of huge competition. Unfortunately, I would say for patients, big unmet need. We hope to really address this unmet need. The same is true for non-small cell lung cancer. So we focus on patients with non-resectable disease. So they cannot undergo surgery. The tumor cannot be removed. Nearly all of these patients have also received chemotherapy. All of these patients have already received immune checkpoint inhibitors, so immunotherapy, and they have failed. They have an inadequate response to the currently available standard of care. And then at some point, the tumor starts to grow again. So these patients are starting to run out of options, and there are not many programs that look really promising in terms of the optimal benefit risk to patients. There are some programs that seem to improve overall survival, but at the cost of very high toxicity. We know that CAN-2409 appears to be really well tolerated. How do we know that? We've actually dosed it now to 1,000 patients, more or less. So it can be combined with radiotherapy, chemotherapy, immune checkpoint inhibitors, surgery. So it gives us a lot of flexibility. So we monitor the whole competitive environment all the time because I'm running a business. But based on the selection of these indications, we are not too worried about this, and we hope that our medicines will really disrupt the treatment algorithm.
What are some things that your current and potential new investors should understand about Candel?
Yeah, so Candel has been largely unknown for a long period of time, actually, based on the history of the company. We put these elements together. We invested very deeply in the science, as will be very evident to everybody when our super high impact paper comes out in the near future. We have a whole series of abstracts that have been accepted as oral presentation or poster presentation at upcoming scientific meetings. We've not disclosed yet which meetings, but we will do that shortly. So we have the external validation in the scientific community at this time. But 3 years ago, this company was largely unknown. I took it public in 2020, so I did an IPO. But the market started to become difficult already. So we tried to be just in time, and we were, by doing a straight to market IPO. So typically, a company nowadays would first do a crossover round where you bring in a lot of money, actually, and then you do your IPO. We skipped that. We didn't have the time. Also, we were largely unknown at the time, which is now starting to change, I think. And that explains that our market cap is very small. There's a complete disconnect, I think, between the value that we've created with medicines, 2 medicines, multiple shots on goal, multiple indications. And I've even not touched upon the newly created discovery platform that we call the Enlightened Discovery Platform. It also refers to Candel, the source of light. We light up the tumor to activate the immune system. Where we have actually signed a discovery partnership with Carl June at UPenn, who's the father of the field of CAR T cells. So if UPenn believes that we can help to solve one of their problems, how do you get CAR T cells into the tumors? I think this is fantastic validation. But investors have not paid attention enough, I think. So we have a very strong investor base that will continue to support us. But I think the time has come to start to explore whether it's time to bring in new investors as well. I think it's a huge opportunity, because how many immunotherapy companies are there that are in phase 3 that can say, we will have a readout next year, the trial is fully enrolled, but we also have all these other programs. I think this is a very interesting opportunity at this time.
Excellent. And an aside, has AI assisted in shortening the research cycle for these and development of these immunotherapies?
Yeah, very much so, actually, in 2 different ways. So for the clinical trials that I oversee, I like very high density of data clinical trials, where you look at clinical outcomes, because ultimately the patient will need to feel better and live longer, but also deep immunological and molecular studies. So very rich in biomarkers. I call that experimental medicine clinical trials. So that leads to an enormous amount of data, where we can actually use computational biology approaches and artificial intelligence approaches, or let's say advanced analytics, to deeply interrogate the data. That's exactly what we do in development. But also in discovery, I touched upon the Enlightened Discovery Platform. Basically, there are a few pillars that describe how we discover new medicines here. First, we focus as a starting point on human biology rather than on rodent biology, because we know that significantly increases the probability of success. So what does that mean? We do deep immunophenotyping of human tumors. We use in vivo and in vitro and ex vivo human biology systems in the lab. So you put cells together in a system, you try to evaluate the effects of your new molecules on these cells. So that leads together to an enormous amount of data, which brings me to the second pillar, which is advanced analytics, including artificial intelligence. So we deeply interrogate these data, which leads to a systematic selection of the genes that we want to deliver to the tumor microenvironment to solve a specific problem, like how do you get CAR T cells into a pancreatic solid tumor? Because they work very well in liquid tumors, in hematological tumors, but they don't work very well in solid tumors. They can't get into the tumor, or the tumor microenvironment is immunosuppressive. We can change that. And as the third pillar, we use a vector, a virus that has been engineered to deliver these genes. And we have chosen HSV, again, herpes simplex virus. That's actually the IP, the intellectual property that we in-licensed from Perividion 3 years ago. And we use that because you can put 5 genes into one HSV. So it has an enormous DNA capacity. And we inject that into the tumor, and we can then change the tumor microenvironment by design. So here again, the second pillar is artificial intelligence.
It's fascinating. And I repeat, I thank you for your service. It is comforting to know that a person of your drive and intellect is in a position you are to help as many people down the road as you appear to be doing. Speaking of down the road, look ahead a year from now. What are some things you'd like to be celebrating personally and professionally?
Yeah, what I would like to celebrate, I think my personal celebration will be completely aligned with my professional celebration. And I would celebrate this with my team, right? Because I can only achieve all of this by bringing in the best people in my executive team, but also deep in the organization. Everybody's important to make sure that they work together in the best way. We created high-performing teams, strong focus on very good culture and behaviors and values. So it's really a total pleasure to spend time with my employees. So what are we, if everything goes well, right, which never happens in life, but who knows, then we would love to celebrate in 12 months from now, so we're talking September 2024, that we have positive top-line overall survival data in non-small cell lung cancer. Wouldn't that be great news for patients? Wouldn't that be transformative? If we can really prolong the life of these patients while maintaining the quality of life and very low toxicity and safety issues. I would love to celebrate with my team next year, if that's what the data will show us, that we have clear separation of the overall survival lines for pancreatic cancer. When we compare optimal standard of care to optimal standard of care plus CAN-2409. Here again, right, we want to have an impact on the patient's quality of life and their survival. We would hopefully celebrate that we have new data for CAN-3110. So this is the HSV that replicates specifically in the tumor, in the high-grade glioma cancer cells, in the brain cancer, and potentially in other tumors outside the brain, while sparing the healthy tissue. I mentioned that we've seen promising results, and sometimes totally transformative case reports after just a single injection. So now we're going to ask the question, what happens if you give multiple injections? Well, it would be a dream in this population where everything has failed by definition, it's recurrent high-grade glioma. If we could start to see that we have just blown away the tumor completely and the patient is doing well. So we would love to see that. It's a very high hurdle, but clearly that would be something that we would celebrate. And finally, we have started to see the first interesting molecules that came out of the Enlighten discovery platform. So we would celebrate, hopefully, if everything continues to go well. And some of these data will be presented at a scientific meeting shortly. Abstract has been accepted, so we have already data. But I hope that we can build on this and that Enlighten will continue to be very successful. So I think that would really justify a fantastic celebration.
Excellent. Please tell us, what is your URL? Where can people find Candel Therapeutics, and what social media outlets you're using these days as well?
Yeah, you can find us if you go to www.candeltx.com. So Candel is spelled as C-A-N-D-E-L. So candeltx.com. You can find us on the NASDAQ with the ticker CADL. We are active on LinkedIn and on Twitter. And then sometimes I give interviews and do podcasts that people can also find, also about other topics. When you go to Paul Peter Tuck, written as one name.com, without hyphen or period. So paulpetertuck.com.
Paul Peter Tuck at Candel Therapeutics. Thank you so much for what you do. Thank you for spending some time with us today on Business Ninjas. I wish you and yours and Candel Therapeutics all the best in the future, and I hope you reach all of your lofty goals. Humanity can only benefit from your work, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. This is what's driving us. Thank you.